Participants are requested to please mute themselves until they are asking a question.
So I'm Dr. Pratibha Pandey, and I welcome you, sir, again in this second session. And I request you to please continue the session with your insightful lecture.
Thank you so much once again, madam. So I'll start, resume my presentation. So I was talking about think, pair, and share, and let me resume my session from there. I'll just brief up about think, pair, and share. As you know that it's a very prominent name in the teaching circles among the faculties about think, pair, and share. In the coming days, Zoom-like software has made it possible to even conduct TPS online. So what basically we can do is we can use the breakout rooms concept in Zoom, and we can even conduct think, pair, and share online. So this is what I wanted to say, and next we'll go on to another form of active learning, which is basically known as peer instructions. So let us dissect the peer instruction method and see what exactly it means and what are the benefits of it and what student will be able to do. As you have seen in active learning, which is basically the principle on which this particular teaching learning methodologies are based upon, that is think, pair, and share, and peer instructions. So students will be able to talk with each other, argue with each other, they listen sometimes, and they reason, they reflect, they draw, and they are actively engaged in the content given by the faculty. They learn through each other in a collaborative manner, and they are able to teach each other, they are able to overcome their misconceptions. And those who do not know also will participate, and down the line they will learn from their peers about what they did not know. And here the pre-existing thinking of the student is invoked or stimulated. So students confront and they resolve the solutions to the problem. So here, what are the benefits to the instructor? Instructor basically, I mean the teacher or the faculty. Instructor will get immediate feedback. Students realize that they are not the only one who are pondering upon the problem posed by the instructor to get the solution. Even they see that the others also are involved in the same kind of struggle, and it builds a friendly atmosphere in the class and a scientific atmosphere. It also improves the communication among the students. Then you come up with the empirical data I have. There are 300 plus research articles that have been published on this peer instructions, and you can see that it has been implemented in various domains like physics, biology, chemistry, mathematics, and engineering. And standard tests have been conducted to find the potency of this peer instructions, what kind of transformation it brings in the teaching learning processes. So it has been found that these courses which are being conducted using peer instructions, they have outperformed the conventional lecture methodology, and student can answer the questions in a better manner, and after the discussions with their neighbors or peers, they are able to get better solutions than individually thinking and individually struggling with the problems. So this is what we can do. We can have a kind of session in your normal class with the help of clickers to perform this peer instructions. So what we can do is, we can focus peer instructions by a strategy where you can base the peer instruction on specific and well-designed questions. So this is the diagram you see here, and an image you see here is that you start basically with a question, and then what happens is that after discussion among themselves, the students may vote or involve in a polling where you get the answers for your question, and then again you can debrief, again you can present your own solution, and again once again you can put the students into polling or voting. So this can be done by writing effective peer instruction questions. And what basically you need to do to write a good peer instruction question is that the questions what you pose to the student should be more conceptual. It should not involve more of analysis or numerical computations. It should basically elicit pre-existing thinking of student. It should not be distracting, and it should not be much written or formulated in a manner where student can predict results of experiments very easily. So make the student apply the ideas in the context you are given to them, and relate them to different representations. So a peer instruction question should not be ambiguous. It should not be a direct question with a direct answer. It should not be too trivial also. So this is what forms a peer instruction question that gives a good kind of outlook to it. And how to implement it. See, it's very simple. In a normal class, what you can do is you can just for 2 to 3 questions you can use peer instructions. A question may take and question this one peer instruction session will not take more than 2 to 3 minutes. So you can pose the question and you can ask the student to use clicker. If the students do not have a clicker, then you can go in a easy way, like you can have a A4 size paper where you can write A, B, C, D as you written in 4 different blocks, and you can fold the paper first vertically and then horizontally, and then fold it again horizontally. You will find at both the sides A and B, and when you unfold it and again fold it, you will find CD in the one side and the second side. So you can either use a A4 sheet of paper, or you can have a simple mechanism where you can ask the students to point 1 finger for A, 2 fingers for B, 3 fingers for C, and 4 fingers for D. And for not letting the other people see your answer, they can keep their fingers close to the chest so that you can, as a teacher, see that and no other can see. Or you can have a clicker software and a clicker device with you, where things become very easy, and immediately you can get the histogram where you can be immediately knowing that how many students were able to give the correct answer. So this is what basically is peer instructions. And when to use peer instructions, you can use in the beginning of the class. Basically what the faculty do, it's a usual practice that when we start a topic, we ask questions to the student before we start the topic, so that we want to know what prior knowledge they have about the topic we are going to start. It is rather to encourage the students. It is rather to inculcate that inquisitiveness in them. We start a kind of discussion. So you can start the peer instructions in the beginning of the class to motivate, to inculcate curiosity in the students, to bring the spirit of inquiry in them. You can also assess their previous knowledge also. You can take this peer instructions in the middle of the class also, where you can check for the intermediate learning that has taken place in the form of what kind of analysis the students are able to make, what kind of evaluation they are able to do out of what they have learned. And it can be end of the class where you can understand the assessment in the form of a bigger picture, where you can give a question to them belonging to a higher level of learning which is created. So what are the challenges and best practices? The challenges are not as big as Barack Obama to understand whether Trump will leave the White House or not, but the concerns are very much mundane, and it can be taken care of if you can understand as a teacher when you're starting this kind of peer instruction. So you can very easily conduct this peer instructions in the online platforms you have. You can use Google Forms for getting the polling done, or the voting from the students. So you can ask a question and then you can give a link to the students to right there to submit their answers, and immediately out of the Excel sheet you'll come to know how many in the class answered well, and then you can debrief them and you can again bring forth your solution to the problem you had posed, so that the discussion continues between the students and you and among the students. So you may find in the beginning that the class is too quiet. The students are reluctant to engage themselves in this kind of discussion because it's something very new to them. But after 3 to 4 kind of iterations, and if you give some time to them, then they will definitely come back in the activity. The class may be very noisy for you and it may be disturbing for you, but okay, this is a good noise and you should tolerate it, because this noise indicates good learning happening among the students. And students just may not participate, but to make them involved in this peer instructions, you need to explain them why you are doing this, and use some challenging and interesting questions, so that they are provoked and they are stimulated to enter into this peer instructions strategy. Students may not know how to reason. This is not quite true, provided questions are well designed. So class will get chaotic. So what do you do when the class becomes chaotic? I think you have seen the normal court proceedings, court of justice, what I mean to say, where the judge will have a hammer, wooden hammer in his hand, and when the court becomes chaotic, he just pounds that hammer on the table to make the courtroom quiet. So you can use such cues, like you can tap the table or something to bring back because when peer instructions are conducted, your class is bound to be chaotic. Then these are some of the best practices, but I have very limited time, and I can share this information with you if you're interested. So this is the video I had, but it's 5 minutes of video. I don't want to consume 5 minutes of time by showing this video. I can share this video again with you. Now let me come to the alignment of assessments with learning objectives. I think I can play this video. Where I can plan my time. Just kindly go through. Is the video and audio visible, and can everybody listen to the audio also?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please watch this video.
Sir, it is okay, fine, sir. It started.
Right. So here the professor is using peer instructions, where he has posed a question on the screen. Students are answering using TIG. So you can see this participation.
Sir, there is no audio, sir. We are only able to see the video, sir.
No, is there any method where we can share the video on Teams, because I'm more familiar with Google Meet and Zoom.
So when you're about to share the video, kindly check the option. There is an option. When you open the share tray, there'll be an option, share computer's audio. Please check that option. After that, you share your video. Then we'll be able to hear the audio also.
Right. So in the sharing.
When you share, there's a share tray.
Yeah.
When you just open the share tray, there itself, there'll be an option, share computer's audio.
There are three dotted, before the open shade tray, more actions.
Yes, when you open share tray, you'll see so many tabs which are open on your computer that you can share.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
above that, on the left-hand side, there is an
yeah. I have that. I got it.
yeah, yeah.
And now let me
Just
see.
check that and then share.
Yeah, let me see now. Now you're getting it?
Yes, we're getting it now.
So here there's a professor which is using peer instructions strategy. He has posed a question on the screen. As you see, there's a screen above, and now he is asking the students to go through the question he has posed or the problem he has posed about finding the refractive index, and the students will use the voting to know to give their answer. First they will give individually, then when they collaborate, first it was 68%. If you see the screen now, it will increase to 83%.
Okay, we're close to 70%. Let's see if we can get to 100%. So go ahead, talk to your neighbor.
So that part doesn't matter. It's just from water to glass to water.
Right, exactly. You ignore the aquarium tank, but it's like you've got these parallel beams coming in. You've got the parallel beam coming in, going air, glass, air. And so each of those changes is going to have a much higher magnitude, which means the ratio of the angles is going to be much higher. So you're going to have more dramatic angle shifts going air, glass, air, than you're going to have going water, glass, water.
This thing that we did for the last problem, this is air, glass, air.
Right.
You're saying the difference is just the angle.
You've got this angle coming in like this. It's gonna bend like that, right?
And then the second one.
Whereas if you have the same thing and this is water, the same water is about 3.
And then the same is true on the way out. So
Right.
I mean,
20 more seconds.
Except it's gonna be in reverse, but the angle is still gonna be like this.
yeah.
But so far, we had a small miracle. We went from 69% correct to 100% correct. Wow, but we still are missing 4 responses. So let's have those last 4 people respond. 62, still 100%. This is amazing. 63, 100%. Wow, I'm impressed. Those of you who got it right very effectively taught those who made it wrong. And in the process, everybody really learns. But imagine that we were pouring in a liquid that has exactly the index of refraction of water. What would happen? So imagine it's not an aquarium filled with water, but some kind of, I don't know, I think glycerin is something that's pretty close to glass. And you put that lens in there. What would happen to this parallel?
This is another example of Bennett Goldberg.
I'll start this as an individual question. You have 30 seconds. Here we go. 30 seconds. Are there 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, or more than 4 ways of finding?
You see the student having device in their hands to do the polling. A, B, C, D. A time frame has been given to the faculty to understand the problem and then answer it. As you can see that the graph shows that
So in fact, there are 2 ways to find this configuration. Again, we want to think about the 4 forces that are potentially happening here.
This is the third example of Jenny Knight's class.
What about this? So what would you predict would happen if you suture both eyes shut for the same 2.5 months during kidney? You shut, both of them are now shut. And then you're going to do the same experiment that you did before.
I think they still need it.
Rather than
But I still think you need it. You just don't need it.
Do we have a prediction? I think we have most people in on their votes. Okay, so you guys said C. Does anybody else want to offer an alternative opinion? We had 2 people who voted for A and B. Anybody have a different idea about what might happen? No different ideas? Nobody wants to say why they maybe voted for B or A? Okay. Well, whoever voted for A was actually correct. Now do you want to vote? Now do you want to say why you thought A might be true? Or did you vote by accident? Press A by accident. Come on, who voted A? Nobody wants to admit to it? All right, well, the answer is A. Why would the answer be A? Can anybody think of a reason?
So as you see that the peer instruction class was used by a faculty with the help of Clicker software and the Clicker device, and also if you don't have the Clicker device and Clicker software, you can go for the way of your fingers that represents A, B, and C and D, or you can have this piece of paper, A4 size paper, where you can indicate A, B, C, and D. So this can be done once or twice in your class. You can use it for 1 or 2 questions per class in a week, or you can do in every class. So it doesn't take much of the time. Now in the current scenario, you can implement that in the online platforms also. As I said, you can use the Google Forms for getting the answers from the students. And I hope that a lot of things might have happened in all these 5 days, where many of the learned speakers might have even enlightened all the learned faculty about using the technology for your online classes. So this can be very well integrated. Peer instructions can be integrated very well in the online platforms. Think, Pair, and Share can be integrated very well in the online platforms. What I discussed about the Bloom's taxonomy and learning objectives need not require a technology, because there is something which is done in the background by the faculty to make the class or learning effective. But when it comes to active learning, that can be very well implemented using the online learning platforms. Think, Pair, and Share can be used by breakout rooms in Zoom, and this can be used, peer instructions can be used by Google Forms. So this is how you can integrate the modern pedagogy in the current technology to make it ICT based learning. So let us come to the next part, that is alignment of assessments with learning objectives. So basically what happens, you have a typical scenario where a topic on logic gates from digital electronics was taught to the second year BTech electronics students, and the course was more focused on making the student design a digital system. And in the midterm examination, the focus was on a question which only asked them to draw a truth table for the logic gate. So you can see that discrepancy here. The students were developed to a level of designing digital system, but in the examination, the question asked was too low as per the cognitive levels are concerned. So what we understand out of this is that the students, they studied the course to develop their ability to design a system. But what exactly happens was they were not assessed for the same ability. Rather, the students' impression was that, the exam asked them questions which are very basic rather than the kind of preparations they have done. Now, a student who is very brilliant and has been taught to an extent of designing a system, they play very well with the basic questions. So what happened? They got good grades in the examination, of course, but the grades were, relevant to the basic questions. It did not reflect the design kind of capability they had. So the students were not happy with it, because if a student achieves good grades, it doesn't mean that the exam has indicated good learning of the students. You can see the disparity between the question asked in the preparation of the students. So this is how it happens when you do not frame the questions, properly, and you do not align your questions as per the learning objective. So as I said in the beginning, that not all the learning levels which we have been discussing till now are at the same levels. Let us again go back to assessment. What do you mean by assessment? So assessment is a process of collecting evidence about how much students have learned from your class. our focus is more on what we want them to learn. And to make them what we want to learn, we use teaching learning objectives. So basically what is there in learning objectives? We'll plan about what the student will be able to do after the class is conducted. So this basically is a teaching learning process. Now what happens, if I ask you a question like whether all the learning objectives are at the same level, the answer may be no, because all learning objectives are not at the same level. So if all the learning objectives are not at the same level, then why does the student put the same kind of effort in answering the questions in the examination? When you are making the student put more effort to climb the higher levels of learning in the classroom, and in the examination you make a student put the same effort for answering all the questions, it doesn't make sense. There is no compatibility between the learning and the assessment. So a question paper that has got all the questions at the level of remembering and understanding will make a student score maybe 90% marks or 99% marks. But those 99% marks, do they indicate that the student is very good in designing or very good in evaluating? No. So the exams results do not in any way correlate to the learning abilities of a student. So what we require is that we need to match the learning objectives which we have framed for conducting a class with devising of the question paper. So here, how do we assess students for the task at different cognitive levels? So we set different learning objectives for our lesson plan. The question should also be framed on different learning objectives when we want to assess the student. So if you see here, assessment question should be of the same different levels of the learning objectives what we have framed. So this is what is how we have to align assessment with learning. So only when we align assessment with learning will come to know the true learning that has happened among the students. For example, you take this question, what is the cognitive level of this question? The unit of resistance is. So it's a basic question. The unit of resistance is ohm, and what is that? What is the level to this particular question belongs to? It belongs to recall. That is the lowest level. So in recall, you can have verbs like recognize, recall facts, remember previously learned material. So student will recognize, he will recall facts, he will remember previously learned material, and the verbs that are attached with recall is cite, label, name, reproduce, define, list, quote, pronounce, so on. So this is how when you frame questions, you have to frame the questions as per the learning objectives. This will enable the student to understand what kind of questions can be asked in the examinations. Otherwise, the student will never know that what kind of questions will be asked in the examination. So we are not in those days where the faculty used to give important questions or faculty used to frame the question paper as per their experience and exposure. Now more of scientific approach has seeped in the teaching learning process. A professor or a faculty has to now use scientific methods of teaching learning to devise or frame the question paper. So his question paper should match up with the learning objectives he had set in the classroom. Last time we conducted a survey where 10 years back of question papers were assessed by our faculty, and we found that 10 years back most of the questions that were asked in the previous question papers were belonging to the first 2 level or 3 level of hierarchy. So those days, this concept of Bloom's taxonomy was not in vogue, or it was not much in practice, and the question papers were framed as per the whims and fancies of the faculty. Please don't mind, I am using the word whims and fancies, but yes, randomly we used to, or on ad hoc basis, we used to frame the question papers. Now the time has come where a lot of transformation has to go, because universities are adopting Bloom's taxonomy for framing the question papers. But if the faculty do not adopt Bloom's taxonomy, then there will be incompatibility between the faculty teaching and the university questions. So what is required is that if you don't want to make a mess out of your teaching in the examination and do not want the students to get confused, prepare the students in the Bloom's taxonomy based question papers so that they can easily answer the questions framed by the university. And this is what is the basic crux of assigning the questions to the learning objectives set for teaching. How you use learning objectives for teaching, the same way you have to use learning objectives for framing your question paper. So this is another question where you have a question of which of the following will cause the current through an electricity circuit to decrease. Choose all that apply. So this question belongs to the second level understand, because the student has to grasp the meaning of the relation between current, voltage, and resistance, and then apply it for answering the questions. Now coming to the action verbs used with understand and level, these are the verbs which you are familiar with and are available all around you in the form of Googling, or you can see a lot of books available on this, so you can just go through it. So I have similar questions. So let us know what formative and summative assignments are in the form of this video. It's a very small video. I hope you can start. As you know, the aim of formative evaluation is to improve upon what has been learned. Means it's ongoing. You can conduct it in the form of flip test. You can give homework. You can use a small project, and you are in a continuous process of identifying the problem and solving the problem. You are able to get the feedback immediately in the formative evaluations. Summative evaluation is basically meant to know what kind of understanding or learning has happened in the student at the end of the course or training, and this is only to give grades to them or give the final score to them. But the new education policy insists upon more of formative evaluation. So it's time now where every faculty has to upgrade himself or herself to come with innovative kind of assignments and formative assignments where you can use rubrics and give the assignments using the rubrics. And some of the LMS have implemented that. They are commercial. They are not like Google Classroom. If you go for Neo LMS kind of software, they embed this kind of rubrics based assignment. So it's my humble request to all the faculty that their assignment should be more aligned to the learning objectives. It should be more formative rather than summative, and it should be more innovative and challenging. So this is all about alignment of your assignments to the learning objectives and how you assess the students in terms of learning objectives. Let me come to the end of the session where I'm going to have a familiar kind of concept discussed with you. You might have been hearing this name, flip classes, many a times, and many of the schools in Europe and America has done it long before we have come across this. I've been hearing about flip classes only from the past few years, maybe 4 or 5 years back, or 10 years back I had, but 20 years back this concept was started by a European teacher in a school. So come what may, we are slowly waking up to the new methodology, and we are walking out of the old conventional method of teaching where it was meant to create more of babus than innovators and inventors. But India is changing very fast, and innovation, invention, and incubation has become a buzzword around the higher education institutes. And for this innovator or maker space lab or incubation centers to flourish, we need to change our methodology of teaching. And it doesn't require a lot of resources, or it doesn't require a lot of infrastructure. It just requires change of mindset, and that's what we need to do. We need to walk out of the comfort zone in which we are, and many of the faculty are very much happy with the chalk and talk kind of classroom conduction. But time has come where they need to upgrade. Otherwise, they'll not they'll perish. They will not be in the race of a quality faculty. So we need to change our mindset. We need to walk out of our comfort zone and embrace this new challenges in teaching learning methodology. It's just as simple as playing a new game by understanding the rules of the game. So it's not a rocket science to switch your chalk and talk learning teaching methodology to modern pedagogy. So flipped classes are very much effective, because if you see the scenario here of two teachers, teacher A will be giving lecture on a topic in a class, then he will give the problem solving exercise for the students to do at home. So what teacher B asks is that he will not make the students sit in the classroom and do the lecture. Rather, he will give a video of his lecture to the students to be watched at home, and the students will watch it at home. And when they come back to the class, there will be no lecture delivery. There will be only problem solving activities in the class. So what is that teacher A achieves out of his conventional method of teaching? So he does give the lecture in class, and he will ask the students to exercise at home. And teacher will see that by giving homework to the students will learn effectively, or they will get more depth of the subject. But students' perspective is that he will not be able to ask questions to the teachers like how he used to ask the questions during the class when he's solving the problem at home. So the key drawbacks are that student will not have access to teachers who are working in the problems at home. And what is the difficulty of the teacher? Teachers doesn't know what difficulty the student will face while solving the problem. But if you take teacher B's approach, what teacher B does, he will give a video of his lecture to be watched at home. This video can be created by you yourself. It may have animations, it may have audio, it may have annotations, or you can take a video lecture from the repository what you maintain as NPTEL lectures or something from Khan's Academy or whatever it might be. And what is the teacher's perspective in this particular scenario? The teacher's perspective here is that he can address or she can address students' problem solving difficulties in class. Because see, what is happening is the learning is happening at home, and the problem solving or the homework what was given by the faculty earlier has been done in the classroom. So what is happening here, the video will teach them the lower levels of learning, whereas when they come to the class to perform the activity, they will involve in the higher level of learning. So student perspective is that they can ask the questions to the teachers during the class, because the class will not be a normal class where lectures are delivered. Rather, the class is about solving the problems on the concept they have learned. So the student can watch the video at their own pace. The student can rewind the video. They can pause the video in between. If they are bored out of the video, they can go have a coffee, or they're having fatigue, they can have a sleep, come back, again resume the video from the point where it was stopped. But this cannot happen in the normal conventional classroom. So they can get immediate help from the peer and teachers during problem solving activity that happens in the classroom. So what is the drawback here? Drawback is nothing. Only the teacher has to put more effort here now to create the video. As I said, that as we progress in the presentation, you will find that the teacher's role is shifting from delivering the knowledge to facilitator kind of role or consultant kind of role. So this is where we achieve that kind of level as a teacher, where you are more as a facilitator and a consultant rather than a deliverer of knowledge. So just reflect, let us reflect a typical traditional classroom, what it does have. During classroom, information is transmitted one way. Instruction lecture, student will take notes, instructor will ask questions, students will respond, student ask question, instructor will respond. This is what typically that goes in the traditional classroom. And what happens outside the classroom, we expect that assimilation happens outside the classroom. Because the instructor feels that when he is giving homework, the student will refer all his notes, textbooks and all, and then solve the problem. But is it so? I don't think so, because a student generally, may work individually or may work in a group, and what they do is basically they submit the assignment even at the deadline, and they may copy the assignments also. So the limitations of traditional classroom is that students don't pay utmost attention what we assume they happen to do so, because as I said, I am very much excited in my class. I am excited when I am presenting something not only to my students but also to the faculty, because as a director I conduct so many of sessions for my faculty also. Probably things like on creativity, on Bloom's taxonomy. I am so excited because I'm very well prepared, but I sometimes find that they are not concentrating, they are not as much excited as I am. So they understand that, because they follow my lecture, they will understand what I have said. So in the instructor may ask questions to them. It's oftenly answered by few, maybe high achievers in the classroom. Others are left behind. So student ask questions. How many students will ask questions? Often asked only by few, that to high achievers. So instructor will assume that all students have understood the class very well. Now take the limitation of classroom 2, where the things are assimilated outside. So instructor gives problem sets and assignments. So these problems what the faculty is giving should not be too challenging for some students, or it should not be too boring for others. That may lead to copying of answers. So students study individually or in groups. Typically happens just before the assignment and submission of deadline, or may focus on assessment, not on the kind of learning they have achieved. So this outside the class assimilation somehow may not go well in effective learning. So earlier classroom was that the instructor will have a instruction transmitted in the class, and assimilation will happen outside the class. Now flipped classes will flip this in the form where information transmission happens outside the class and assimilation happens inside the class. So the video will make the student understand the concepts, but when they come to the college, they are involved in the activity, and the activity will lead to assimilation of the concept what they have been watching in the video. So this is what flipped classroom is. Basically, flipped classroom is one way to ensure that class time is spent in assimilation rather than information transmission. So instructor finds to create videos on topics, and student watch videos before coming to class. What you can do is you can give a 10 minutes or 20 minutes of video to a student to watch at home, and you can give some time period, maybe 1 or 2 days. So when the student is back, what you can do is you can just give a small test to verify whether he has watched the video or not. And if the student comes out to be authentic in the test, then you can go for the real test of making the student perform the activity. This will definitely give a very good amount of satisfaction to the faculty when the student who has watched the video and learned the concepts outside the class will use those concepts to solve the problems in the class. So assimilation happens in the class and learning happens outside the class. So this transmission of information will be at the level of remember, understand, and apply. And the assimilation in the class will be of the level of analyze, evaluate, and create. So that's how higher order of learning can happen in the classroom, and lower level of learning can happen in the home or outside the class. So how does it work? I had shown a video in the beginning where a physics faculty, actually his name is Mazur, and he teaches physics to paramedics. And he says that flipped classroom with peer instruction results in significant learning gains compared to traditional instructions. There's another professor, Wellman, he has given a statement that flipping the classroom with small group discussion can produce significant learning gains. So there are many studies establish the benefits of active learning strategies. So flipped classroom basically incorporate that active learning, and you can reap the benefits of active learning using the flipped classroom. And let us summarize why flipped classroom is a good idea. The answer is that class time spent in assimilation, more time can be given to the student to spend in assimilation rather than information transmission or one-way information transmission. Class time is spent in higher cognitive levels, as I said, a student can use apply, analyze, and create kind of, cognitive level of thinking rather than lower level of thinking like recall and understand. And he gets the support of peers and instructor while he's working on higher level of learning, where a complex problem is given to the student, and instead of he on his own solving it, it makes a big difference to him when he solve the problems in the class, because he gets the help of his instructor as well as the neighbors or his peers to solve that problem. So as you have seen in the previous video, the performance of the class, which was 63% in the beginning when individually things were happening, was escalated to 100% when peer instructions was implemented. So this is the beauty of active learning and flipped classrooms. So you have to give content in a given context, and students should be actively engaged in problem solving and critical thinking. Students are encouraged to ask exploratory questions and delve beyond core curriculum. So you can implement that beyond the syllabus kind of concept in the classroom, and students will get a big transformation from passive listeners to active learners. This is what the flipped classroom activity is. So what is active learning? We have already seen. Students are actively engaged and learn from each other, builds a friendly academic atmosphere, includes all students in teaching learning process, involvement increases, participation increases, and learning increases, reflection increases. This is what happens in the active learning. And the correlation between flipped classroom and active learning is that flipped classroom itself is based on the principle of active learning. So classroom with instructors and peers present is more useful for students to apply their learning rather than listening to the faculty standing on the dais and transmitting the information. So in the flipped classroom, in the in-class time only, you can devote the tasks that promote active learning. Since information transmission happens before the class in the form of a video, which is watched by the students at his home. And as I said, you can have a kind of flipped classroom activity where you, since I told you I am from the computer science background, I use computer related concepts to explain my ideas. So here I can do one thing. I can make the student watch a video that defined array and show some examples using C++ programming language. Now, when they come back to classroom, I give a worksheet to them having programs using arrays, where the students have to predict the output of some of the programs, find errors in the programs, and I leave some missing blanks in between my program to be filled by the students. So think, pair, share can be another activity that can be implemented after the video is seen by the student to write a program or sort an array. So what do you see? If you see here in this 2 lines, a lot of activity happens here, and you should be aware that flipped classrooms are not something where instructors simply create lecture videos and distributes to the students. Students simply watch the videos, and faculty only gives some clarification in the class. This is not flipped classroom. Flipped classroom is making the student learn lower level of concepts outside the class and make them do activities on higher order of learning in the class. So this is what is a real flipped classroom, and the slide you are seeing indicates that what is not a flipped classroom. So what are the key elements in flipped classroom? As we have discussed earlier, student gets an opportunity to gain first exposure to the topic before class. We can provide incentives for students to prepare for class. We can facilitate higher level of cognitive learning in the classroom. We can provide mechanism from peers and instructors to make the student learn and to solve complex problems. So I now put my presentation at rest, and I would definitely expect some kind of questions from the August gathering and the learned faculty, because let me also get the feel that my preparation, which I've been doing from the past 1 week to make this presentation possible, has got the due respect or not. So lastly, I should thank everybody for being so patient. So I always have a doubt when I take the class, when the class is very silent after my lecture. So I am in a dilemma that either they have understood all the things what I have delivered, or they have not understood anything. So I don't want to take this silence for the formal conclusion. Rather, I want to know whether my little effort to discuss about the modern pedagogy with you has got any results or not. So thank you everybody, and especially Rashmiji once again for inviting me. I hope I have done my job as per your expectations, and I hope we'll have similar kind of engagements in future where we can enlighten each other with our knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir. Now I ask relevant questions related to the topic.
So this is Hina Pahar.
Yeah, please, madam.
Yeah. So not much of a question. Like you said, you told the importance of and yes, we also use flipped classrooms little more like effective in teaching and learning.
The audio is not very clear,
When
madam.
it's an offline class, then the concept of flipped class is easy. There is noise to us. In cases of online class, find it little difficult. Also, when you are delivering a lecture, now in this FDP, being like student, right? We have questions we want to ask, but unmuted and then all that creates a little like hindrance. So we kind of the questions to ask, and then it ends. Like the time that we are teaching in unmuting and there is no in that time, the teacher they will move on, and then we'll keep our questions to ourselves. But this doesn't happen in offline classes. So that concept of flipped classroom is little tricky in online classes. How to handle that? Sir, you are muted, sir. Please unmute yourself.
You asked a very relevant question, madam. This question is there with every faculty because, see, I cannot say online teaching is best or worst. Online teaching is better. That's what I can say because there are so many answers with the technology has to give us. As you rightly said that, there are some hindrances like, some of the software do not allow us to control even the audience also, like Google Meet, we can't mute anybody. So they can enter anytime and they can start talking or they can share the screen anytime. So technology is developing. And secondly, as you said, for muting, unmuting, you find it as a hindrance and the tempo is lost. Yes, of course. But I think, we are slowly getting acquainted with this kind of technology, and students also are trying to maintain patience because they are understanding the software limitations also. And my problem is that today also when I take the feedback of my students, they say that, sir, we want an offline class. We are vexed up with this online class. But, that's where we come into blending. So we have to judiciously blend our teaching learning process by using the offline mode as well as the online mode. Where you find online mode may not be that effective, you can switch to the offline mode. Or hopefully after this vaccines are coming in the market, we can again go back to our college and again we can have a blend of teaching learning process where that's the title of my topic, ICT based learning. So eye contact will not be there is one of the question that was raised by one of the faculty, that he's not getting satisfaction because as in the physical classrooms, they used to have eye contact with the students to understand how much they have learned. And the other thing is that in the offline classroom, based upon the response of the student, we flex our lecture. But here we can't. That's one of the limitations, if all the students open there or switch on their videos, then a lot of bandwidth will be consumed and our class get disturbed. So that also we can't do to have an eye contact. But yes, when we are seeing at the camera and our students are watching us, eye contact can happen in the online classes also. Probably we'll come in, we'll be very soon getting a software where all the problems faced by the faculty can be sorted out. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. We are highly for inviting us with such technical aspects. I believe, sir, that this lecture would definitely help us in making our lecture more interesting for students as well as in engaging our students. So thanks again, sir, for providing such an insightful lecture. Thank you so much, sir. So please unmute yourself, sir.
I wish all the faculty all the very best in their future endeavors, and I would be very happy to see all the teachers of our country transforming themselves as enablers of learning rather than deliverers of knowledge. Any kind of queries or any kind of questions are there, I can take it up. I have shared my details on the slide, so you can just note down my email ID, my phone number, and you can contact me for any kind of resources that you require related with this presentation or any other thing related with academics. So thank you once again to all of you, and good luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now I request all the faculty members shared in the chat. As well as I request you all to be 30.
Shall I log out, madam?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.